investments, the right kinds of investments, need the right sort of policy environment. They need a supportive policy environment that allows and encourages people, both at the micro level and at the firm level, to make those kinds of investments, be they investments in physical capital or human capital or the kinds of things that are needed to enhance people's opportunities to generate these kinds of futures that we'd all like to see them have. I know that the politics in many African nations have been very difficult for many, many years. You mentioned the genesis of the countries as being truly unfortunate. I suppose another unfortunate aspect over the years has been the effects of the Cold War on so many African nations and the struggles that the nations had to go through because the major powers were so involved in Africa for unfortunate reasons. But finally, to my question, I guess, to what degree today can the governments of Africa, and are the governments in Africa, working to revise or enhance their policy structure to promote those kinds of investments and enhance people's opportunities to increase their own human capital and to have access to the credit markets or financial markets in order to make investments that can indeed enhance our opportunities regarding sustainability in the future? I apologize for the length of that question. I know with jet lag you like nice, short, quick questions, but I appreciate your comments and thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much. And again, I will try and answer that one. But if I don't do a very good job of it, maybe sometime we can exchange and give you something. I'll take a little bit of more time to be able to answer that one. When I talked about sacrificing, I didn't mean that some of us must die for that sacrifice. Although at the current population growth trends, in fact, we might just be forced into that, because the basket might not be enough to feed all of us. You know, we are all reading with great enthusiasm and excitement, and sometimes, I don't know, whatever, we're saying that the dinosaurs actually disappeared. What makes us so sure that we can't disappear as well for the same forces as the dinosaurs? I think there were too many in this world, dinosaurs, and the resources just couldn't support them anymore. Combined with changes in climate, then they just had to disappear. We are actually causing the change of climate ourselves. No wonder. And so, bear with me, it was not sacrificing for or through death. It was just sacrificing by reducing greed. For example, why would the governments of the world pay an estimated $54 billion per year in fisheries subsidies? Why? It's not for our stomachs, is it? Why would the fishing industry, for example, catch 70 million worth of fish that we call as trash fish and just throw it in the ocean? Nobody's eating it. So the sacrifices that I was making reference to is just to be able to be responsible and reduce the level of greed. I know we are a species, greed is our character, especially when it comes to at our own individual levels. I'm only saying, can we be responsible and reduce it? So that's the kind of sacrifices that I was suggesting, that if you take everything that we are doing today, look into restaurants, the number of bags of food that we have either ordered wrongly, not that because we are hungry, but simply because we thought that that dish is much more delicious than the other one, and then you say, oof, go throw it. And we are doing it while others have nothing to eat. right investments and policy. It's true that Africa was torn apart by the Cold War. You had either to go to the extreme right or to the extreme left. Bad news if you were in the middle. Very bad news. Tanzania, we tried to be in the middle. And in fact, by 1982, 83, 84, 85, there was thinking about having a coup in Tanzania. But the army people said, even if we have a coup, for what? There's nothing to take. And so we survived the coup. But we were in very, very bad shape. Nobody wanted us. That is taking mid-stand. But that mid-stand has made Tanzania be a very, very stable government in Africa. In fact, we have gone now through retirements of 2 presidents, very renowned ones. And we never pester them. We never take them to court. And there's not even an issue of embezzlement of funds. They are just states people, senior citizens in the country that we always call upon when we have problems. Policy formulation is extremely important. What we have learned in Tanzania is you can do policy formulation in 3 ways. Now, I would like you to give me one which is the best. We have situations where policy formulation is done by consultants coming from outside, some of them coming in those countries for the first time, and they only sleep in hotels, produce the policy document, and slap it on government so that they must approve it. And it is happening, and such policies have been developed in Africa. We have policies that are developed by government civil servants locked up in one place that they must produce the policy because it's wanted by the cabinet in less than a week. So 3 days, you must come up with a policy that the government wants to pass. And the third one is a policy that you give time. Let, first of all, the citizens know what the problem is. And is it really a problem worth being addressed by a policy? And if it is, then what is it that has to come up? The first 2 approaches to policy are very much driven by investments. In my same country, Tanzania, one very famous leader gave permit to a hotelier to build a hotel at the edge of the beach, while the law says land 200 meters from the highest high water mark is public land, no investments. But in Tanzania also we know how to negotiate. You know, the good thing with Tanzania is that, you can also negotiate. The government official, realizing that he has made a mistake, he said, interesting, I'll go to the president. Mr. President, can you issue a decree that now the setback line should be 60 meters? The president says, why? Because I've already made a mistake. I've issued a permit to a hotel. That's easy. In the government gazette, done. So it was 60 meters. So that hotel actually was built legally. So investments can also change. And in fact, in most of the African countries, I would say policies being driven by investments is not a strange thing. It's quite a common thing. What we are saying is, put an awareness on the citizens, they will stop such nonsense. Also in the same country, Tanzania, a scrupulous investor wanted to almost cut a large chunk of mangroves in our country for prawn farming, not for the Tanzanians, not to feed the Tanzanians, but to send it elsewhere. Fortunately, you here in the US, you have the law that says unsustainable prawns shall never be imported, thank God. But somehow, those Tanzanian prawns could also come through the sustainability of whatever country you may want. It's just a stamp. I'm not saying that that can't happen, but it can happen. But at least through informed citizens, those people in the village that can hardly clothe themselves, we have a law in our constitution says, if there are 200 disgruntled citizens, disgruntled about an issue, not necessarily a development issue, disgruntled about an issue, in fact, they can take that issue to court, and the courts must hear the disgruntledness of those 200 citizens. And that was what was used in Rufiji. In fact, they took the investor to court with the ministry that granted the permit for that investor to put up prawn farms in those areas. And that's how that project was stopped. And again, it's the same credo. Let us have a vision, let it be the vision of the people. Investments will come in, but they will come in with the acceptance of the people. I think the policy structures in most of the African countries, they were the policies that were developed by the colonials. Some of them have never been reviewed to date. But in Tanzania, a country which I know, in fact, the president issued an order, come 2000 December, if there is any ministry, any agency which has not reviewed its policies, that policy should be called null and void. We frantically tried to review in the combination between, we also have a policy you must consult. In between consultation and everything else, at least, we got most of the policies now reviewed. But reviewed policies is just like new wine in old skins, because the legislation, you can imagine a policy on forestry 2000 being pegged on the legislation of 1954. So we are doing it slowly, give it time. I think we should be able to succeed. I'm not quite sure whether I've touched on all your questions. But you are right, investments must definitely come into play, but I think it's the entry of those investments that we are worried about. And policies we must review. It's the style of reviewing the policies. Sacrificing is only reducing greed. Otherwise, I think we have a fair share in this world to survive, all of us.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Just the front end of this thing. It's just a quick additional ammunition. In the Bible it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. You might talk to your preacher friends to get a little bit more ammunition for your story.
Can you come again?
In the Bible it says, someplace, I don't know where it is, where there is no vision, the people perish. You may have to talk to your preacher friends. You might be able to throw that in to help you in your presentation.
Huh?
At dinner tonight, we were talking about the seaweed farming versus the fisheries, and I was just wondering if that initiative how that came about. Was that a governmental? Was there government support for that, or was that through private investment, or were farmers encouraged to go into seaweed farming versus the dynamite fishing and things?
I think you have actually posed two questions. One is about dynamite fishing and the other one is about seaweed farming. The history of seaweed farming, in fact, is almost, can I say, about 17 years. The experimental seaweed farming in Tanzania began in 1975 with the assistance of a USAID actually project given to the University of Dar es Salaam to a Professor Mshigeni, who was then dealing with seaweed farming. The experiments that were done between 1975 up to 1982 showed that seaweed farming, in fact, could be practiced in Tanzania on a commercial basis. There was some seed funding that was provided in order to promote the seaweed farming, but definitely the market forces were not in place. They were not just right. And so consequently, it was only until 1992 that the subject of seaweed farming was revisited by the government of Zanzibar. And it was revisited not as a government-promoted activity, but rather as a citizens' movement looking at the crash of the price of cloves. And the whole people of Zanzibar said, then what other cash crop can we actually grow? And seaweed farming was then found to be like the alternative. And the way it started in a very peculiar way. There was a Danish electrical engineer, not even a marine scientist, who was installing electrical things on Zanzibar. And when the project ended, he didn't want to go back to Denmark. He said, I'm going to stay and I will start some little projects. One of them was ecotourism, and the other one was promoting seaweed farming. Denmark is the second country that buys seaweeds in this world. There are only two countries that buy seaweeds in this world. It's Denmark and the US. So this Danish visitor to Zanzibar went to the Danish company and said, if I was to be able to generate that much amount of seaweed, would you buy it? And the Danish company said, with pleasure. It took that Danish visitor to Zanzibar 8 months to be able to collect the amount of seaweed that was required as a shipment to the Danish company. And that, when that was done very successfully, then the Danish company came and said, now we want that much of seaweed every month, if it is possible. And so that was the target for the Danish businessman. And the way he did it, he didn't have his own farms. All what he did, he provided the strings to the people that wanted to grow seaweed, so that when they bring him the seaweed, when he buys, then he recovers the price for the strings. A second company came and said, this Danish guy is making a lot of money. This was driven by the American company. Said, go and also buy us seaweeds. This company went to Mafia, and in fact, the company set up its own farms and hired people to work on the seaweed farms. Never made it. Seaweed farming in Tanzania, it must be individually motivated for whatever reasons those women want for the farming of those seaweeds and for the money that they get. You go there and promote it like a big business where you have large farms, it won't fly. Because the people will get the money and you will get less and less and less seaweed by the day. So it must be stimulated from inside. About the dynamite fishing, again, the dynamite fishing is a very tricky story. In fact, coastal fishermen are very much against dynamite fishing. Dynamite fishing is done by outsiders. The fishermen themselves don't want to see dynamite fishing. They know exactly what kind of damage is done. but there are a few scrupulous people in the village that link up with the people that get the dynamite and then they blow up the fish. It's a seasoned fisherman will never use dynamite fishing. So that's where we have the war, because those people don't have the fabrics of a fisherman. All what they know is blow up and collect whatever fish you can and sell it. So those are the types of people that we have to fight against. In Tanzania, we had to use the Navy in order to deter those dynamite fishers. And until today, in some parts of Tanzania, the Navy is still very actively engaged in combating dynamite fishing. And we are being successful. I think Stephen told you about this district commissioner, a lady that was so tough that she took all the dynamiters to task and said that if you do not appear, I will throw you in jail. No need of going to court. She has got the powers as a DC to throw people in jail for whatever time they can stay there. And she said, I will use those powers for you dynamite fishers. And they all ran away and surrendered. And now that district is a happy district, no dynamite fishing, and the fish are coming back.
Very last question.
I wanted to ask your opinions on a certain issue that is affecting Narragansett Bay and our local communities. And when I saw your screen up there with the comparison of Narragansett Bay and Tanzania, if I interpret it correctly, we need to be doing sustainable development on a larger scale on development issues in Narragansett Bay and in our area, as opposed to maybe